Okay, guys. Rawls and Nozick, Alistair McIntyre, chapter 17, almost at the end. So, two of the giant moral philosophers of the later half of the 20th century was a guy named John Rawls and another guy named Robert Nozick. Now, they wrote these two books that around the same time, and they were diametrically opposed to one another. And there were secular moral philosophers who were trying to figure out what is the nature of justice and how do we figure out justice, again, short of revelation, just using pure reason. And again, these were the giants of the field. They still are giants of the field. I remember back in my freshman year at Yale, we took a class in political philosophy. We all did, almost all my friends and I. And, in that class, we read a book on John Rawls and we read the book by Robert Nozick. We analyzed Rawls and analyzed Nozick. And then, of course, you had to write a paper comparing the two, trying to figure out who was right and who was wrong. That was just like, let's write a passage. I feel like we all had to do as freshmen in college. So let me tell you about John Rawls, let me tell you about John Nozick, and let me give you McIntyre's critique of both and how he thinks both of them fall short, of course, on coming to any real sense of justice or virtue, for that matter, or what is morality. So Rawls has this famous thought experiment, kind of somewhat analogous to the thought experiment of John Locke, in trying to figure out what is the nature of justice. Like his social contract, his theory, his mythology, his a thought experiment. So John Rawls says, imagine this. This is how we get to a just society. This is how we design a just world. Again, the question is justice. Imagine that you live behind what he calls the veil of ignorance. That's his famous invention. So you are a being, except you don't know your gender, your race, or any of your natural attributes. And then what you have to do is design the world in which you will be born or put into. So what kind of world would you make? So you don't, and once you show up in the world, then voila, you find out what you are. So you might be a tall, good-looking, extremely intelligent, athletic white man who comes from 8 generations of extreme wealth. That's a nice way to be. Or you could come out as a disabled Black woman who is a child of sharecroppers and poor people living in a not so great area. You don't know which one of these you'll be, or any other variety of things in terms of gender, race, or class, or your wealth, or your family, or history. What kind of world would you design? I suppose you could have a crazy person who might just sort of roll the dice and imagine a world in which rich white elite men are going to rule the world, and maybe there's a decent chance you might come out as one. So then you win the lottery. More likely, though, if you were living behind this veil of ignorance, you would design a world in which all rational people, with maybe a few crazy exceptions, all rational people would try to create a world in which there was a quality, equity, in which the stuff you would get, the privileges you get, the money you get, the property you get, would not be contingent on your race, class, or gender, or your family background, that we'd all get a fair shot at getting enough goods into our world, into your lives. The book's pretty long and lots of complicated ways of working this out, but generally what he values is equality, or what you might call fairness. Okay, so that's John Rawls. Now Nozick, his contemporary, who wrote his book around the same time, who comes to the opposite conclusion. Now, Robert Nozick has a theory on the nature of property. Basically, he says you're all entitled to property. We're all entitled. We have a right to property. Now, that could be things like your wealth or land or money or cash, your house, or simply owning physical things. Now, do you have a right to own things? And if you have a right to own things, then that means someone has a right to own a lot of things. And that means I might own a lot of things and you might own a lot less, right? But nonetheless, I have a right to my stuff, and you cannot take it away because it is my unalienable right to own lots of stuff. Well, why do I have a right to own stuff? Why is it that is that just a social convention? It's just a weird thing we've inherited from the world around us. Why does anyone have the right to own anything? Why can anyone, I, in a sense, own my house, and I own the acre upon which my house is. I own my car. But why? Why can't you just walk up to me and say, give me your car. I want your house. I want your land. And I can say, no, I have a right to my property. But why? Why do I have a right to my property? Is that just a fiction? Is that like a unicorn or a witch, that we just sort of invented some idea that I have a right to property or not? Well, Nozick says, no, it's a real right to property. So where does property come from? It says you have a right to property if you've acquired it in a fair and just manner. Or if someone gave it to you, and so the person that gave it to you in a fair and just manner. So for example, I have my house. I had money, right? I paid someone money, and in exchange, they gave me my house. The way we exchanged it was fair. I didn't shoot him. I didn't coerce him. I didn't bring a gang of thieves to bully him into it. The person that sold me the house did it with uncoerced manner, free, and there was no bullying or anything mean or awful or criminal that happened. Same here. I gave him my money freely. I parted with my money to get my house. Same as my car. I just bought some Christmas candy with my daughter at the CVS just 10 minutes ago. Gave money, or credit card in that matter, got the candy. Okay, everyone saw what was going on. It was a fair exchange. Thus, I have the right to the candy that I bought my daughter. Oh, by the way, I bought the candy, but then I gave it to my daughter. All right, I gave the candy to my daughter because I wanted to, and she received it. It was uncoerced. It was free trade. On the other hand, there was like illegitimate means of getting stuff. Like, for example, like if I like, put on a black mask and had a gun and, we're all black and snuck into my neighbor's house and I stole their TV set, not just saying who does that stuff anymore. But I mean, that would be a unjust, unfair, criminal way of acquiring property. Then I am not entitled to that TV because I didn't acquire it the right way. You could say, for example, that let's just say that the house I live in, let's say I'm an aristocrat, that it was given to me by my father, right? And he just wanted to give me the house upon his death. Great. And then I'm allowed to have his house because, he was given to me and he wanted to. And where did my father get the house from? Well, it was given to him. Or where did his grandfather get the house? Well, it was given to him by his great grandfather. This kind of exchange of property is freely given and thus I'm entitled to it, all right? By this theory, though, I mean, it seems to me you can then argue that taxation, right, is unfair and unjust. Let me just give you an example on a really simple level. Let's just say that, I own a lawnmower, and I own my house, and I have neighbors who own their houses, right? Let's just say that's all fair, just as a given. And let's just say that they don't want to mow their lawn. So I say, listen, I'm going to mow your lawns for you all summer long, all spring. I will take care of your lawn. I'm going to mow it myself. And in exchange for me mowing your lawns, okay, and this is all fair, free exchange, you will give me money, right? So let's just say I'm really good at all my lawn mowing and I work really, really hard on my lawn mowing business. And at the end of the year, I have now $100,000 in cash. Let's just say I have $100,000 in money just stacked up in my living room, right? $100,000, that's what I made. Let's then say that what's going to happen is the government is going to look at my cash and say, great, we're going to take 40%. We're just going to take it. Why? I say, and they're going to say that's just a law. But it seems to me, though, I never agreed to give the government my cash. Maybe I'll be nice and give it to them, but I don't want to give them my cash. It's my property, right? And so therefore, the government does the government have a right to take away my property? I mean, it's almost like my property is my natural right. They're violating my natural rights. Okay, so that means, so he would have a real problem with that kind of taxation. He can work it out perhaps, but it is my right to keep my own money. So it really comes down to, so Robert Nozick and, Rawls and Nozick clearly have diametrically opposed theories of justice. And there's something almost irreconcilable about them. Now, one could argue that Rawls in his world, let's put aside who's right or who's wrong. Rawls in his world is internally consistent. Nozick in his world is internally consistent. I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but they are both internally consistent. They're both smart, yet they cannot come together. Why is that? It seems to me that what the difference is between Rawls and Nozick is their starting principles, or the first principles. What are their highest priorities? For Rawls, it's about equality. That he would say, for example, that if you are poor, right, and you're born into this world poor, you are poor at this moment, you have a right to have the government tax rich people and give you some of that money, because his highest priority is fairness and what is equal. Now, Nozick also has a theory of fairness, except it's not about equality. It's about a sense of justice, that it is just for me to keep what I make. And it is wrong for you to take that away from me. That's just thievery. As wrong as it would be for my neighbor to steal my money, it is also wrong for the government to take my money and give it to poor people. It might actually be a nice thing to give my money to poor people, but it's still a form of thievery. They have different priorities. Now, one thing that's interesting that now where McIntyre wants to come in on this, say they're both wrong in the sense where they have a lot in common, and it makes them fundamentally flawed. Both ideas, Rawls and Nozick, are based on a certain kind of anthropology, a certain view of human nature. And that view of human nature is that we are liberal, free, individualist, and possessive, and we're autonomous, meaning you're like going around in the world all by yourself, trying to get stuff for yourself. All right. And you don't, and it's really about a kind of competitive individualism. And by the way, in both Rawls and Nozick, there's a victim in this, right? You could actually say, or there's someone who's losing out. All whatever you're getting is based on someone else getting something taken away from you. For Rawls, if you want equity, it's based on taking money from rich people. For Nozick, if you want to be possessive and rich, it means other people are going to be poor. If you're rich, other people might be poor, all right? But there's almost a zero-sum game. If I want what I want, you can't get it. If I want what I want, you can't get it, all right? But both these ideas are based on the idea that we are competitive, individual, autonomous beings floating around the world, trying to get stuff for ourselves. And what often happens in politics is a certain kind of clash between balancing these things out. It's an interesting idea of what is the role of our Supreme Court in the United States. It's not like there's some grander vision of the just or the good, but rather he's saying functionally speaking, as I said before, when we talk about Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., it seems to be that courts just try to create a certain kind of balance or equity in which you sort of say, well, no one wins completely. We just try to scale things out to some win and some lose. And they bring up a really interesting example of affirmative action, where their ruling on the affirmative action wasn't really clear. They said, yeah, you're allowed to discriminate on the basis of race, but you can't really discriminate too much on the basis of race. It was just really weird. And they're just trying to go with it, but don't go too far. It seems to me that the way we sort of settle on the issues of taxation, of redistribution of economy, is similar. Like, well, yeah, I mean, there are some people who just want to keep all the money and not tax at all. There's some people who just want to tax it all and make it almost borderline socialist. The solution we have in America is that we have a democracy and a republic, and we vote, and you say, okay, tax, but not too much, just some kind of balance in the middle. And so it's not real. And again, it does seem to be that we have competitive, possessive, liberal, free individualists who want stuff. Okay, McIntyre's critique is that there's no sense of community. If you were to take, and he doesn't really have a solution, by the way, he doesn't offer a solution in the book, but it seems to be what he's saying is that both of these people are impoverished. Both philosophies are impoverished in that they don't have a sense of virtue, meaning they don't think about what is good for the common good, what is good for the common weal, what is good for the entire community, the family, the human race, or this nation. Can we love one another? Can we think of each other as a common form of a tribe? Are we living together and working together? Let me piggyback on what I said about my family as a mini version of virtue. I don't imagine myself as being competitive with my wife. It's like, I want you to suffer, so I will prosper. I want your career to be diminished so that my career will be great. I suppose some people do that. Well, that'll just be awful. That'd be a perversion of virtue and a perversion of family. I don't think of my children as like, I will send you out to the factories to work and I will take your money, ha ha ha, because I'm bigger and I'm meaner and I can oppress you. I don't oppress my children. And so in some sense, I mean, the way I think about my life as a husband, ideally, aspirationally, the way I think of my life as a husband and a father is one of almost evisceration of my own good and my own needs for the sake of them. There's nothing I have in me that I wouldn't give to my wife and children. And I like to think that the same is true for my wife. And there's nothing that's in my wife that she has that she wouldn't give to me or my children. And the idea is that we prosper together. I can't imagine that I would prosper while my wife and children are suffering. That's perverse. That's weird. That's gross. It can't work. So we're not possessive, competitive individuals in my family. At least we shouldn't be. This is the aspiration. And yet at the same time, though, in my family, it's not a socialist, communist, egalitarian world in which we take all our worldly goods and divide them in fourth, and we all get 1/4. It's not a world in which it's not equal in terms of authority. I mean, we don't take a vote. I've mentioned this in the past. We don't take a vote to decide on what we get or what we do. There's a hierarchy in our family. My wife and I are on top, and my kids are, they don't have as much authority as we do. I try to be very fair and loving to my kids, but there's no way to make everything completely fair. They're different kids, different personalities, different needs, and we try to be loving and judicious and caring, but we don't exactly take all the food, all the money, all the resources, all the lessons and cut them exactly in half. I just came back just now from taking my eldest daughter to her piano lesson. And, both my daughters take violin. Well, for a long time, both my daughters took violin and piano. The younger daughter just wants to quit piano because it was overwhelming. It was just too much for her. So I'm like, maybe she'll pick it up again. So right now, my older daughter takes piano and violin. My youngest daughter just takes violin. Lessons cost money. So in some sense, I'm spending more money on my older daughter. At the moment, my younger daughter doesn't complain, but it's not like I've got to take the money I'm giving to my older daughter for her piano lessons and figure out a way to equitably give that to my younger daughter. It doesn't work that way. I love my daughters equally, except it's not equal necessarily. It's just about love, and we have to figure out how we work together as a family. I think there's something similar about that because it's not competitive individualist people going after themselves. I don't know and how to solve the problem of equity and taxation and redistribution or affirmative action in America. And McIntyre doesn't offer a systematic solution, but he does want to say that the foundational way upon which we approach things seems to be flawed in Rawls and Nozick. But rather, if we took the vision of virtue that he's offering, in which we have a legacy of family, a legacy of history, we have these Aristotelian categories that we all submit and yield to, that we think about the common good and the community and the roles we play, that might be a much richer, a more robust way of going through solving these kinds of problems. And the current language that we have for justice, the current tools that we have are fragmented, inadequate, and just, it's like they're the pieces and shards of a richer vision that we once had. And now we just have the little pieces that look familiar. They're kind of reminiscent of a larger, more robust world of justice, except you just have the fragments and they're incoherent. All right, on that happy note,